afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another State of the Balance with me, your host and Pearl Dane, taking a look here at the State of the Balance for the last month's meta, that is the month of June. So, what's happening? We obviously got the mini patch there, sort of. Again, calling a patch might technically be pushing a bit, considering how little it actually did, but, you know. Let's talk about it. Starting out with the Brits, a sort of, rather obvious elephant in the room, covered in opium and the stains of many, colonies. Basically, again, I hear some, oh, the Brits are fine now. They're just, in fact, underpowered again. I'm just like, no, they're still the same blobby mess they were before. Like, that's really the thing. Ultimately, again, the patch just pushed blobs again. Not this one, but before that. And, like, it's just not fun. I mean, the problem with the Brits is, and that's really the fact is, and I've been saying this repeatedly, like, they're not a very well-designed faction. Like, they took the Company's One Brits, which is an absolute mess, somehow slightly changed, but still kept a lot of the core elements, which were a mess, and that's it, really. The problem with the British design is it's a gimmick, Let's just create a faction that's really strong in some areas, really bad in some areas, because it doesn't have the tools other faction does, and somehow that will not turn into a complete mess. Except, of course, it did 2 games in a row. And the problem is, it can never truly be balanced. Either it's going to be like, way too good, or it's going to be not very good, because there's no middle ground to hit with the Brits, because they lack the tools that allow for a middle ground to exist. That's really the fundamental flaw of the British faction. The stuff that's supposed to make them work isn't there, and they're just making up for it with just, infantry sections just basically break the rules because they're bulletproof. And you know what, plus the emplacement, which again are static elements, but again, like, incredibly difficult to kill. So again, they either have to be really bad or they have to be really good. There's just no middle ground because Relic removed it. And that's effectively the problem with the British. There will never be a fun faction to either play or play against, because either they're going to be miserable to play as or they're going to be miserable to play against. And typically, they'll be both, because you really, in the end, can't do a lot with the British. It is a fundamentally flawed and doomed faction from the get-go, and unless Relic is willing to fundamentally overhaul it from the bottom, there's nothing that can be done. It cannot be saved. It's like, deciding to build a new Chernobyl where the previous one stood. It's like not going to happen, yet Relic, by the way, did it in the first place, with companies too. So, I mean, they clearly got the gumption but not the wisdom to realise perhaps it wasn't the best idea in the first place. By the way, in essence, again, like, if they want to try making something out of the Brits, ultimately, again, they nerf the sections, buff the Vickers, nerf the AC, give the Universal Chaos some more utility in the late game. That's one thing that's really lacking. Provide more benefits to the Hammer and Anvil tactics upgrade, so there's more use to them, because the problem is, again, like, most of the abilities you get there are, quite frankly, utter rubbish. Like, they just don't anything. Again, they're sort of like what the Wehrmacht Tier 4 is supposed to be. In theory, they do offer some of that, what it is, but at the same time, it's not very good. So it in fact ends up being sort of like Wehrmacht Tier 4 anyways. So I think some buffs need to be applied to the British late game, though, again, very wisely. And again, follow up by some of those on the nerves. I think if they can nerf the early game, slightly buffs to the late game, probably also give the officer more utility, because again, while they added him, ultimately he sees no use. He's part because, again, why get him when you can just push sections, but also because there's still a lack of utility. So again, I'd recommend just somehow just giving them a mortar, like a mortar half-track maybe, and I think that could make the Brits somewhat acceptable as a faction, somewhat playable, and perhaps not so utterly miserable to play against. But ultimately, and this has to be understood, the Brits are never going to be fine as a faction again. Fundamentally, they cannot be saved. Like, it's a pet project someone had, and it really should have stopped in the first company. It was very fast, yet for some reason it carried on. So, not really much I'd say. Again, the Brits are just never going to be fine. And honestly, obviously I'd prefer they'd be balanced and somewhat, playable and fun to play against, but at a fundamental level, I don't think it's really possible, simply because, again, how bad the core idea of the British faction is. So yeah, I'm going to have to say it again. I'd love it if they were playable again. I'd love it if more factions were playable and all that. But really, short of a severe overhaul or Relic just, accepting something has to change them, which so far, throughout all these years, from all what here, they aren't. I just don't think there's anything to do. And so, just nerf them and accept they're just dead in the water. Because really, if you have like 2 choices, either have them be miserable to play or miserable to play against, I'd go for miserable to play, because at least that way you're not dragging everyone else down with you. And that's really what the British faction is doing. It's just dragging everyone else with it into the mud. I don't think that's a particularly wise strategy either. So, that's the thoughts there. Moving on to the Soviets, I mean, you know, it's same old, same old. Very focused on airborne troops tactics. Got motor, that's a bit of got rifle, shock rifle, of course, and larger team games. Of course, the doctrine of the ISU are popular because the ISU is kind of nuts there. Though it's not very good in 1 versus 1 games, which of course says something, but it's kind of dumb in team games due to how a lot of them focus on maps are quite frankly poorly designed, and so the ISU can easily work the rest in a 1 versus 1 map. The ISU doesn't really have a lot of maps it does particularly well on, to be fair, so that's also something that's working out when talking about balance in 1 versus 1 in team games. The fact is, most team games have terrible map design, like absolutely atrocious, like, and 2 versus 2 in particular is, well, again, I'm making the comparison there because it makes sense, but Chernobyl, it's like, again, they just never decide to lock it down and just decide to pour more, you know, nuclear waste material on it, hoping that somehow, if they add enough, a miracle happens and it all turns good. It isn't, Relic. But yeah, about the Surge Minerals, again, I'd say this is 3-divisional field gun continues to remain, I think, rather overtuned. Again, it's an anti-tank gun, roughly on par with the pack, except it has high explosive shells to function as artillery and has 6 men and can also spot for itself. Like, pick one Relic like that, or I want my Stu to also have access to high explosive shells and better veterancy levels, because this isn't right. In fact, I think, and this is something I'm going to make when I've gone through all the factions, but I think overall all anti-tank guns need to be toned down, period. But beyond that, there's not really, I suppose, much wrong there with the Surge. Again, it's just the T-70 field's a bit O-tuned, and, well, you know, the field guns are dumb. I think that sort of roughly covers that one there. Moving on to the Americans, again, reasonably fine. Pack outs, I would say, remain the issue. Doctrinally, I mean, there's, you know, quite a good amount of variety, so it's fine there. Though, say, mechanized becoming much more popular. Heavy cavalry is not so much popular anymore because, well, when you can just go for a lot of tougher Shermans, well, why go for the Pershing anyways? But it's also partly just, and again, this is going to be the, you know, larger theme, but anti-tank guns increasingly just shut out any heavy armor. It doesn't matter what faction. 2 anti-tank guns shut it down. So, I mean, part of the issue is just anti-tank guns are currently too good. It effectively shuts down, I think, all heavy armor at the moment to a large degree, because you get 2 anti-tank guns, which is a fraction of the cost and time and effort to getting a heavy tank out, and, well, your entire strategy went down the drain, if you want to go for heavy tank, that is. So I think that's part of the problem there, but that's sort of roughly it. I mean, again, for the most part, Allies, I think, are roughly fine, except, again, anti-tanks are tuned and the Brits are dumb. Moving on to the Germans, the Oberkommanders are struggling because they do not particularly perform well versus the Brits. They, in fact, do very poorly, partly to the universal carrier. Then again, that honestly may need to turn down. But also just, the problem is, the meta is also just heavily focused on light vehicles, and the Oberkommanders does terribly against light vehicles. Like, they usually have access to no snares without going for something with panzer facilities, and even then, that's not particularly effective. So, I think we either need to, like, at a larger level, look to, like, maybe pushing back light vehicles a bit, or the Oberkommanders needs Panzerfaust. Maybe have them trade off in some other area. Maybe they lose something to then get the Panzerfaust, but something needs to happen there. Otherwise, I think, again, if, like, anti-tanks are toned down, I think the rest of the Oberkommanders would be better, because the King Tiger would also suddenly become a bit better if, again, 2 anti-tank guns doesn't shut down, you know, the ultra super late heavy tank, which costs a lot of time and resources. Like, if that could happen, again, King Tigers, perhaps the rest of the Oberkommanders will also function better. So, yeah. Wehrmacht finally here, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the 5-man Grenadier squads and Ostrom, and of course, as, you know, anyone could tell you then, it's because the basic Grenadier isn't that great or amazing, or for that matter, the MD-42, which also tend to struggle. Like, Wehrmacht early game right now, I mean, to use the metaphor, use the Ostrom, basically you have to play very aggressively early game, because late game, you're typically not going to have a great chance, because, again, you do not scale very well. That's really the Wehrmacht's issue. And, again, part of it, again, anti-tank guns just absolutely shut down most of the Wehrmacht's late game, but also just the rest of the stuff you have dies incredibly easy. So, again, and you cannot recover there. So, again, if you lose all your infantry there, you really at an incredible disadvantage, because you do not scale well. Like, you do not get, you know, sudden super upgrades for infantry, unlike the other factions. So, again, you kind of get shut down at a certain point as the Wehrmacht that way as well. Like, Tier 4, again, needs to know, although, again, I think if they were just to turn down anti-tank guns, I think maybe Tier 4 as a whole might actually just become better. They still think they need to add some sort of, like, Tier 4 unit to the Wehrmacht infantry, like Knights Crossrollers. I still very much stick to that one personally. Like, you know, or whistle down, whatever. Just something there I think needs to have to help with the Wehrmacht's infantry a bit. And, you know, again, that can apply some better buffs than, you know, capture rate, which they had to remove, and, you know, far cheaper reinforcements. I think they could do that again. There might be some hope there, but partly again, the early game is just for the Wehrmacht at the moment too weak and it's too easily pushed back. And then also the problem is not, it's also if you, like, anything wrong happens to the Wehrmacht late game, you get immediately shut out of the game. You have no way to recover. And that's really the main issue of the Wehrmacht. You can just get so completely easily shut down. So really, either the Grenadiers or the MD42 has to be buffed. I personally recommend the MD42 because obviously just get Grenadier spam again, which isn't that interesting. So my advice would be to buff the MD42 to also make mortars and other artillery more attractive, which is also something that's just increasing just large chunks of infantry and blobbing. And, you know, buffing MD42s would also help create more diverse meta gameplay that way. So that would be my suggestion there personally. But overall, again, as there's sort of been some of you might have noticed, the big theme is anti-tank guns are too good. Get 2 anti-tank guns out and you can effectively shut down most armor. It also renders most heavy armor not very good. The problem is anti-tank guns just shut down light vehicles and medium tanks, heavy tanks, again, and they're incredibly cost efficient about it. They're quite easily fast out as well, so it's not like, you know, you get punished for going for a bunch in the early on. That's like, no, there's no punishment there. And again, for the Soviets, you're even harder to punish because they're 6-man and they fire as artillery. It's quite frankly absurd. And remember, they nerfed the Stug for this problem, and the Stug costs more and it's easier to take out than them. Yet somehow the Stug was the problem and not anti-tank guns. And again, I repeat, they do this, again, shut out heavy armor, which again was the complaint, was the reason they nerfed the Stug. And they can do it even better with veterans because most anti-tankers will all gain increased, you know, high rate of fire and penetration. So at veteran 3, an anti-tank can easily take out a heavy tank than the Stug could. So yeah, I honestly think like the main issue right now in the game is straight up anti-tank guns. Like, well, that and the Brits to a degree, but again, I think part of it again also just anti-tank guns shut down a lot of the Brits late game. Like, again, I feel like perhaps not 90, but 50% a lot of the game's issues right now in terms of balancing are basically boiled down to the fact that anti-tank guns are too good. And talking with a lot of players, like in a higher rank, at least the ones that want to talk to me, obviously, the issue is very much 2 anti-tank guns is an incredibly efficient strategy. Like, it just shuts down so much. And it's also really tedious to play against because countering them is also very difficult. So, I mean, really, they need to, like, either turn down the anti-tank guns penetration or they need to make them a lot easier to kill. I think that's really, like, right now the main issue in companies too. Like, just anti-tank guns shut down everything too much and they effectively render all heavy armor, and all factions are relying on late game heavy armor, like the Brits and the Wehrmacht. To a lesser degree, the Oberkommandist, not very good because it doesn't matter how much you invested into your King Tiger, your Tiger Tank, your Pershing, your IS-2 or whatever, because 2 anti-tank guns that came out ages ago and easily have Veteran 2 or Veteran 3 there will shut them down. That is not great. That is in fact incredibly bad. And again, if they nerfed the Stug for that, and again, those were Stugs, they cost more, they came later. They've also easier to destroy with anti-tank guns. Like, you would figure they prioritize this, but again, for some reason. But again, I think the main issue right now, and this is something that again applies to all factions. All factions will benefit from this if anti-tank guns were toned down in just overall effectiveness right now, because a whole chunk of strategy at the moment is basically just cut out because it doesn't matter. Your opponent can just get 2 anti-tank guns and shoot it to bits. So that is my personal opinion, and I think, again, the main issue that Relic, honestly, and the balance team should be looking into, like, 100%. Look into those anti-tank guns, to a lesser degree the Brits, but look into the anti-tank guns. I do not think there's any way around it. I think anti-tank guns are absolutely a negative element to the game right now, and I think they're actually detracting from companies too at the moment. So, yeah, that's sort of the overall state of the balance. Anti-tank guns are getting obnoxious and are becoming a problem that needs to be dealt with. So that's sort of rough it here. Again, sorry about the rant, so I've got a bit off there, but again, I really feel like anti-tank guns are getting way too ubiquitous, and I think they're just shutting down significant parts of the game because they're simply put too efficient. Like, you see double anti-tank guns increasingly everywhere, and they just shut down everything. It's not good. It's incredibly bad. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it. Did subscribe, like, share, comment on it. Tell your friends, tell your family, but not your enemies. And of course, do you can support by pledging on Patreon or donating. This is Pro Links, and cheers, and see you all another time. Bye.